Board.
Welcome, everyone. Hello, hello, hello.
Hello, hello.
Just let everyone arrive. And just seeing if you can mute yourself as you arrive so that we can make sure that everyone can hear me.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi. Hi there.
Beautiful.
No more props on. Oh, I've done that.
We're just going to make sure that everyone's muted and then we will begin. Thank you for being here. It's really lovely to see some very familiar faces and some brand new ones as well. Okay, Emma, are you all set? Yeah, lovely. I think that we will begin. Lovely. So welcome, everyone, and thank you for being here for this event that will last for the next 90 minutes to really be in devotion together to the precious work of Circle. And some of you who are here, I know really, really well. Some of you are meeting me for the first time. And for those of you who are newer to Sister Stories and my work and how I approach things, this evening might be a little bit different to other kind of free online gatherings that you might have been to. My intention here is that we can really sink in to a different way of being together, one that is slower, one which is softer, and one which allows us to hopefully ignite a spark of something within us that we might take this work of Precious Circle out into the world. I often see part of my job with the work that I do with Circle to sort of tend this bonfire and invite people to come and sit around the bonfire. And for those who want to take that work out into your communities, you light your torch at the bonfire and you take it out into the world. So that is my hope for today. And it's worth me just spending a tiny moment here defining what I mean by circle, and we'll define it together a bit more fully later on. But what I mean when I talk about circle, I work with women specifically, but most of what I share and teach is also applicable to mixed groups. I mean a really particular way of gathering. So one that is ancient, one that is simple, one that is sacred, a space where we can really come together to speak truthfully, to listen deeply, and to remember that we belong to one another. You know, we are not a series of individuals, we are a collective. And it's the kind of space that we were never meant to forget. But most of us, not all of us, have forgotten it. And so part of my work in the world is to support those who want to lead really beautiful, impactful, and really well held circles in their communities and beyond. So to support all of us to navigate the incredibly challenging times that we're in. So I'm going to hear from you in a moment and just get a sense of why you're here. But it's worth me just taking a few short moments to introduce myself. So my name's Gemma Brady. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the founder of Sister Stories, which is the UK's leading women's circle organisation. And we train hundreds of facilitators a year who go on to create really beautiful spaces of real world impact. And we've got all sorts of women stepping into this work. One of the things I love about circle work is that there are no entry requirements. We have doctors, we have former police officers, we have pharmacists, we have Reiki healers, we have a head teacher, we have an opera director, we have people from all walks of life, as well as those already in the healing arts. And one of the things that I hope that I will be able to support in my lifetime is as many diverse women training in this work as possible and taking it out into their communities. And I often think about the brilliance of Circle is that it's a place that we find belonging, not because everyone is the same as us, and not because we've all had the same lived experience or look the same or from similar backgrounds, but actually we find belonging in Circle spaces because we're accepted in our uniqueness. And I hope that even though we're together for a short amount of time, that you might be able to find some of that here tonight. This is the first time I've offered this particular event, and I must confess, those of you who know me will know this. I find it so hard to talk to big groups. And one of the things that has happened over the years of running Circle and leading Circle is that I've been able to learn to do that. But I come here with nerves this evening because I'm a soul who, left to their own devices, would not be speaking to hundreds of people on the internet. But I'm here tonight because I believe so deeply in the power of this work. And my intention really is quite simple. I want us to be able to have a space to get really truthful about the complexity of the world that we're in. I want us to have a space to name what's hard, what's hurting, what feels hopeful, and to start to feel into what role Circle might play in all of that. And it's a space for us to ask together, what kind of world are we trying to build? And what might Circle, this ancient way of gathering, play in that? There's this really beautiful line by a writer or a poet called Carlo Levi, and he has this idea of that the future has an ancient heart. The future has an ancient heart. And I think that whenever I think of Circle, that moves something in my body when I hear those words. Circle is an act of remembering. And that's some of what we will do together tonight. But before we go any further, I'd love to take a moment to hear from you. So in the chat box, if you could share, what is it that's drawn you here this evening? What is it about Circle work that has made you come and be curious about tonight's space? It felt needed. The future has an ancient heart. That's beautiful. Just a word or a sentence about what's drawn you here. Here to find my tribe. I wish to hold grief circles. Feel calmer and free. My intuition brought me here. Community. I can see connection and community coming up again. I run circles and want to do better. Wanting to play my part. Yes. Intuition. Healing in different ways. Community, connection, curiosity, ancient wisdom. Beautiful. Doing something that fuels my soul. It's so wonderful to know that we're here from, many of us are in the UK, but we're actually here from all over the world. And to see those words coming up again, community, connection, playing my part, doing something meaningful, finding my people, being called to serve, being called to help. That's one of the opportunities that comes through doing this work. And it's worth me sharing a little bit about my own journey with it. And I don't want to spend too much on that tonight because there are other places that I can share that with you. And if you don't know anything about me and you want me to send you some more information about my journey, I can point you to a few podcasts I want to use tonight to really talk about what's possible for us collectively. But one of the things that is astonishing to me about Circle is I started holding it in my living room in London as an experiment. I was a documentary maker at the time. I had sort of dabbled in the healing arts, but I didn't really know that my life would go in this direction. In fact, I had no idea that my life would go in this direction. And at that time, when I created it, it was really simple that what I wanted to do. I wanted to create a space for women to come together and speak truthfully and vulnerably about their lives. And what happened in that room each time I held it was this little thread of connection would weave between us that bound us together in some way, but that would also start to ripple out into our daily lives in simple and profound ways. And at that time, I had this sense that what happens in the circle doesn't actually stay there. It's not contained within the room it's in. It's not confined to the space. It ripples out beyond. And personally, the first thing that looked like for me was it was the place I found my voice. So when I held my first ever circle, I was shaking like a leaf. I was absolutely racked with fear, and it was such a difficult thing for me to guide the group. And over time, as you can hear, I'm here, I'm doing it. My voice is working. I'm able to talk to you all. It's been a place where I've really been able to exercise that muscle of not only articulating myself, but of sharing my heart in a way that feels very natural to me now. And because I've learned to do it in circle, I've learned to do it in other spaces in my life. And when I first started this work, I thought it looked like a kind of community space that had a sort of way of allowing us to experience individual healing and connection in a communal space. But what's happened over the years that I've been holding it, the more I've sat in circles, the more I've led circles, the more I've trained women in holding circles and watched them go out into their own communities in their unique way, it's come to be very, very clear to me that circle isn't just a personal healing modality, although it holds that potency and that power. It's almost impossible that if you sit in the space long enough, you won't emerge changed. But what I have come to believe now is that it holds the potential to be one of the most socially important spaces of our time. Truly, I think it can offer a sweet balm to the fractures and the pain of the age we're in, so we can find the sort of strength to continue. It can help us work with this loneliness epidemic we're in, with burnout, with the disconnection that so many of us are feeling in different ways from our communities. Some of us feel it from our bodies, often even from ourselves and our hearts. And it's one of the few places where we can really learn again how to belong to one another. And not doing that in a way that's sort of performative or transactional, or that we're trying to get something out of it, but in a way that's very pure and true. There's a sort of purity to the space that I love. And it's not just a space that is about what happens in the room. It's about how we go out and live when we leave it, how we listen, how we lead, how we take responsibility and show up with tenderness and truth. And so what we're going to do tonight is we're going to spend some time in imagining the impact that we could have with this work. I'm going to talk for a few more minutes, lead us into some meditation and some reflection, and then I'm going to offer you a framework for understanding the power of circle and the different ways that it's possible for you to lead this work. And I think before I go any further, I called this Circle for the Times We're In, because the truth is we will all feel this to different extents and it will show up different ways in our individual lives. But we live in a world which is shaped by top-down systems, patriarchal, capitalistic, white supremacist systems that have been part of the fabric of society for so long. Sometimes they've been hidden in plain sight, depending on your background and your awareness of these things. But in 2025, it's like they're ripping through the surface and they're becoming more visible and prevalent than ever. And it's showing up in every single direction. So in our ecology, in our institutions, in our homes, in the silencing of women, in the violent oppression of those who are perceived to be a minority, in genocides unfolding and being live streamed to our phones. And it is, I could go on with that list. It feels to me that we're closer than ever to the edge of collapse. And I don't want to sound dramatic in that, but when I name that, it's to really name the difficulty, because we are more in need of one another than ever before. And people like us who show an interest in this have something to contribute. Circle won't stop war. It won't stop climate change. It won't stop all of the things that I've named by itself. But it can create lots of different spaces, depending on what you believe in most is most important and how you express your individual space, that can create a sense of connection and peace and purpose in the places we live and we work and we gather. And so that's part of the context that we're operating in this evening. And I think that we have a great amount of potential to do something meaningful with this work in our lives. And so to begin, I want to really just take a moment to light a candle for all of those in this world, in this moment, who are experiencing the real challenge of our times, who are experiencing it in their homes, in their families, in their bodies, in the institutions they work in the societies they live in. We light it for the others who are experiencing that. And we take it for a moment just to acknowledge the ways that we might be impacted by the violence of this world, by the challenge of this world, by this time that can feel so destabilizing. Taking a moment to acknowledge what is within us. And we can't look away, but we don't need to carry it alone or carry it in despair. We can really work to create spaces to metabolize what's happening, to create spaces where we can hold complexity without collapsing. My personal tendency is to collapse into feeling overwhelmed, disempowered. I'm just one person. What can I do? And actually, through my work in Circle, it's helped me to learn how to hold a strong spine and to not be someone who collapses inwards, but someone who looks outward to the world and go, there are things that we can do to change this. Circle's a space where we can start to practice a different kind of leadership, a more matriarchal leadership. And by matriarchal, what I mean is one that is relational, that's rooted, that has collective care at its centre, that is real and that leads within, from within, should I say, not from the front. Circle isn't a top-down hierarchy. It's a room in which, if you are the facilitator of the group, you can lead from within, and you can do it in a really gentle, beautiful way. And so that's what I want to spend our time together sharing tonight. Not what Circle is necessarily, not only what Circle is, but actually what it makes possible. And we're going to touch on some key principles about how to hold the space, but actually I also want to really name how we can make sure that we do that with as much integrity and care as possible. And there's one thing to sort of say up front that feels important to name, particularly for those of you who haven't sat in a space with me before. One of the most perhaps challenging things that I've encountered and the deepest things that I've learned about the path with Circle is that if you're a person who strives for answers, it's not a space that immediately delivers answers. It's got much more subtlety and slowness than that. And it's actually more of a space where I've learned, and many of the people that I work with have learned, to do what Rainer Maria Rilke talks about, which is to live the questions, to sit with the questions, to sit with what isn't yet resolved, to listen to what's within, to what's underneath, and to stay present with what is, even though we don't know how it all fits together yet. And so that's the invitation to bring tonight as well, to really bring this spirit of curiosity and living those questions in the room together, to dream into possibility and to sit all together in hope, so that we can start to work out how do we play our part in the world through doing this magical work, if that is what you feel called to. It might be helpful for us together to start to build a bit of a working definition of what we mean by circle, because each of us word will conjure up different things. So I'm curious, when I say circle or when I say women's circle, what comes to mind for you? Perhaps you might share it in the chat. Perhaps a word or a sentence. Spaciousness, community, gathering, home, sharing troubles, empowerment, vulnerability, support, strength, connection, mystery, circularity, non-judgment, stories, togetherness, beautiful, being held, empathy, inclusiveness, a place with no fixes, kindred connection, love, safe space, beautiful. Empowerment and connection, yes. Friendship, time for each person. You know, I was talking earlier about the patriarchal models we live in. Can you feel the difference in all of these words that are being offered? This much gentler, more inclusive, more welcoming, more non-hierarchical way. It's such a beautiful energy to touch into, actually, this sort of possibility of what's different when we step into this other kind of space. So I'll just offer some of my definitions, and it resonates with lots of what you've said in the chat. So to me, Circle is a space where we come together in our humanity. It's a deeply human space. Many people who sit with me in Circle in my spaces have a deep sense of spirituality, but actually the spaces I offer are secular, in the sense that they're not affiliated with any spiritual tradition or religion, and they don't exclude on that basis. They're human, and we can experience our human sense of spirit through sitting in the space. It's a space for me where we can speak less from the head, although of course that happens more from the heart, where we can lay down those roles that we play in our everyday lives. And as women, for many of us, that will probably about 50 different roles that we play to different people. Actually, I say 50, 500, who knows how many you carry, but we're all carrying many different roles. We're all needing to wear many different masks and be different things to different people. In Circle, we can lay all of that down and just be who we are in the space, even if it's for a few hours. It's, to me, a space where connection and community and compassion and all those things that many of you named in the chat can thrive, where we don't need to fix or be fixed. It's not therapy, although it can feel therapeutic. It's not coaching. It's not a space for advice giving. It's a space where we can enter a different way of being that is rooted in care and slowness and depth. And in a very literal sense, often it looks like a group sitting around a fire. Often we meet digitally and we have our little kind of virtual fires in the form of a candle, each offering a story or reflection about their lives to be listened to without interruption or advice giving. So that's a sort of, between us, we've got a shared understanding of some of the qualities that Circle can hold. I love the little candle emoji in the chat. It's worth saying about the chat, actually, I can't keep up with it. So if you say something, I don't respond to it. It's not because I'm not ignoring you. It's just because I'm focusing on the speaking and I can't always read. So the other thing that it feels like is worth saying about Circle is that it's not new. You know, I named earlier, the future has an ancient heart. This work is ancient. It predates every self-help book and every journaling exercise and every healing app. It is the art of gathering in a way that our ancestors knew was medicine, where storytelling was healing, where ritual and rites of passage were part of the health of the community, rather than something that has been sort of, like it is now, pushed to the fringes of society. Circle work is alive and well in our world, and it's largely been preserved by Indigenous communities who never lost it. But in the Western world, in my lived experience of being a UK woman, a white woman in the Western world, it's in the fringes of society. It's been lost. And before I found Circle, I don't know if any of you will relate to this, but have you ever had that feeling of like this hunger that you have in your body and you can't name what it is? It's not like it's got a sort of identity or it's graspable, but you can feel it. When I found the act of sitting in Circle with women, it's like that hunger was sated. It's like I finally had found the thing that I was looking for. And I often have women come and sit with me who sort of almost find themselves there by accident and say, wow, this is the thing that I didn't know that I even needed. But now that I have, it's what I was looking for. I think that so much of our world shares that hunger. And I truly believe that if more of us stepped into these spaces, and I'm not just talking about groups of women like us who sort of are in the know and have some sort of familiarity with this work. I'm talking about society as a whole, where Imagine what the world would be like if this was in every village and every town and every city, on every corner, if it was in our institutions, if the world worked in a more circular way and there were more circular spaces for people to go to. Imagine what it would be like. I don't think we would be in the mess we are in now if this more sort of egalitarian and non-hierarchical way of gathering and truthfully coming together as humans had been preserved. So hopefully each of us can go out into the world and do some of our preservation work after this session. I'm going to offer you a framework for circle work and sort of dive into the technicalities of it a little bit more. But before I do that, I really want to offer us some time to slow down and really listen. So taking a moment to get as comfortable as you can in your seat. I'm just going to guide you for about 5 minutes in a little meditation, a little visualization, a little bit of connecting inwards. So closing your eyes or softening your gaze. Taking a deep breath. Perhaps the deepest breath you've taken all day. And just see if you can find some softness in your body, in your being. See if you can find a way to really land here in this space with hundreds of other women who all believe in this work, who all feel in big and small ways this pull, this hunger for the kinds of spaces that we've shared about tonight, this pull towards circle. And for some of you, being here, it might feel like some sort of sense of coming home. And for others of you, you might feel more uncertain, more outside the experience. Perhaps it's a familiar experience of not quite being sure why you're here or whether you belong. And whatever you're experiencing, know that that is okay. Know that all of you is welcome here. The enthusiastic parts, the uncertain parts, the tender parts, the joyful parts, all of the parts of you can take a seat around this fire. You're in the right place. And as we sit here, I invite us all to imagine that we're gathered around a crackling fire, that there's a woman to your left and a woman to your right. And we're sitting shoulder to shoulder to shoulder together in circle. And in the center, the fire crackles, steady, alive, holding the space for us all. And as you sit here in this field of beating hearts and breathing lungs, listen to the part of you that brought you here. The feeling you have in your bones that something about this space, this kind of work, is important. Listen to that voice. What does it want you to know? What kind of life do you want to live for yourself? What kind of world do you want to live in? And how might holding or attending circle make this possible? What kind of life do you want to lead for yourself? What kind of world do you want to live in? And how might holding circle make this possible? And I invite you to just listen. To let whatever arises, arise. For some of you, it might be words. For others of you, it might be images. For some of you, it might be a feeling. And there's no right or wrong answer here. This is the space of permission. And so tuning in to that part, that hunch, that nudge, that feeling, that knowing that brought you here, that drew you to circle work. What does it want you to know? What kind of life do you want to lead? And how might circle support that? And taking a moment to just sit with those questions. Remembering that you're not sitting with them alone. That you're sitting with hundreds of other women who all share some version of the feelings that you do, of the knowing, of the being drawn here. And touching for a moment just how powerful that makes us collectively. And taking a final few moments to be with those questions, to be around that fire, I invite you to start to feel your feet firmly planted on the ground. Taking a few deep breaths, if that feels good to you. And slowly coming back to our shared space, to the room. And I want to give us a couple of minutes. We're going to have about 3 minutes to journal on what came up for you, particularly those 2 questions. What kind of life do you want to lead? Actually, it's 3 questions, forgive me. What kind of life do you want to lead? What kind of world do you want to live in? And how might Circle make that possible? What kind of life do you want to lead? What kind of world do you want to live in? And how might Circle make that possible? And so if you're able to sit and write and just let the words flow from your pen, stream of consciousness style, no self-editing, not catching yourself if something feels a bit unexpected or strange. What kind of life do you want to lead? What kind of world do you want to live in? And how might Circle make that possible? Just taking a moment to finish your final sentence. And you might have much more to write. 3 minutes is not a very long time to answer all of those questions. So perhaps you can take them with you beyond this session. But I would love, there's some sharing happening in the chat already. I'd love to hear what came up for you, and I'll read some of them out. An aware, authentic life of connection and harmony with what is, a world filled and connected to nature and the heart, a world that emphasizes soul and spirit rather than transactional striving for financial success and gain. Circle would, excuse me, exemplify and hold me in that. Beautiful. Peaceful, diverse and open, repattern the way we listen to others. A world where true adult, grown-up leaders are leading. A world with more understanding and empathy. Yes. Service, wild and wisdom living. Self-trust, open and reflective. Beautiful. Share, enjoy. A world where it's safe to be open-hearted. A gentle world when we lift each other up. As you're sharing these things, I've just got this strong question, which is like, many of you would have seen various political rooms around the world where things are being discussed, and they're not being discussed like this. Can you imagine if this was the kind of spirit, this was the kind of inquiry that was and conversation that was happening in those rooms? I mean, just extraordinary, where we can meet each other. Oops, reading too quickly. Without judgment and with openness, where the energy of life can flow free. Yes, 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 yes. Greed stops that happening precisely. A world where we soften instead of harden towards each other, where we are honoured as sacred and wise leaders in our own lives and communities. Exactly, Suri. Exactly this. I don't know about anyone else, but I feel quite emotional hearing this and just remembering actually how many of us there are that hold this hope for the world and the ripple effect that that has on our communities and our ability to all live meaningful lives, connected lives, lives that aren't driven by this sort of capitalistic hunger and power, but that are driven by something gentler and more true. I want to offer us something new that I haven't ever shared before as a way of thinking about, for those of you who want to go out and hold circles, or for those of you who are holding circles already, just some of the invisible stuff that happens beneath the surface to make sure that we can hold really well ethically held spaces. I don't know about any of you, but I know lots and lots and lots of people who have been to circle type spaces and experienced things that at best feel uncomfortable and at worst are really harmful. And I don't know if any of you have been in any of those spaces, and perhaps you can share in the chat if you have, whether that resonates. But part of my work that I'm here to do is to equip as many people as possible with ways of holding space really well, so that we are creating the best and most robust space we can. And it's really interesting. There was a woman who used to come to my circles for many years, in person and then online in the pandemic. And she eventually decided to train in circle with me. And when she was about halfway through the training, she was like, I must say, I didn't know what I was going to learn, because when I sit in the room, it looks so simple and like almost nothing is happening. And the truth of circle space is that what happens on the outside is really gentle and subtle, but underneath there is a really robust architecture that I want to sort of try and put a shape to today. And for those of you who've trained with me before, I've never shared this. This is brand new material for everyone, and it's a new way of trying to explain what happens underneath the surface of a circle. And it's going to be quite a lot to take in. So my encouragement to you is to remember you're going to get a replay. You don't need to try and scribble everything down. You don't need to take everything in today. I hope that I can plant some seeds within you that will grow. And I'm going to encourage you to listen less with your head ears of like, oh, I've got to get all of this information, and more with your sort of heart and gut ears. And so I'm going to just share some visuals to help, hopefully, give you an anchor for this. So bear with me a second while I just rearrange my screen. So hopefully you can see it. Share screen. Can you, well, no, you can't see that. Can you see this? I actually now can't see you. Can you give me, yeah, I can see some nodding heads. You can see it. Lovely. So we're going to talk through tonight what I'm calling the circle compass. Holding circle is less about having a list of things that we're going to do and a direction that we are sort of driving in, and an outcome that we're trying to reach. And it's more about doing something that can feel very hard in this kind of patriarchal world that many of us have been raised in, most of us probably have been raised in, where we need to guarantee an outcome and we need to give people value for their money if they pay to be in our space, and we need to be able to control where things are going. Circle is much more subtle than that. And so rather than having a list or a script or a kind of outline of your space, there are some key things that you can learn to work with under the surface to support you to create a really robust, well-structured circle. And I'm going to talk through these one by one. Again, see what lands, discard what doesn't. And we're going to start with the self. One of the great joys of circle work is that it can do so much for you as you lead it. I am so grateful that I sort of stumbled across this work and have now ended up dedicating my life to this work, because every time I hold a space, it holds me it heals me in some way as I hold it. I have had an extraordinarily difficult few years in my personal life. I mean, I could share what's gone on and I could be here for sort of a day and a half with all of the whys and wherefores and complexity of it. It's been really incredibly difficult. I live now as a single mum of two very small children. Society was not set up to support me. And the thing that has got me through is multiple times a week holding this kind of space, holding circle space. And so it can heal you from the inside out. I often say, like, my work is my medicine. It's what sustains me. It's what gives me purpose. And because you and your presence as a facilitator is so important, although it's not a hierarchical space, it is one in which you need to be rooted and grounded and have a strong nervous system, have a strong sense of process for inner inquiry, have deep, deep, deep presence and ability to really truth tell, and this sort of very gentle leadership. And so when the facilitator has really kind of got to grips with this self pillar, it can improve you, as I mentioned, your life, who you are, and how you move through the world. I cannot list the number of ways in which it has changed me and how I move through the world. Emma on the team, who's here, who some of you might be able to see, she trained with me a couple of years ago in Circle, holds about 1 million circles a month. She's just really well established in this work. And she often talks about how it's changed her family life and her relationships and what shifted there. And there's many, many people for whom that's done that for. In terms of the impact of your circle, when you get this self piece right, and we're going to break it down a little bit more in a moment, the circle is, I was going to say successful, and I'm catching myself with that word because that is actually entirely the wrong word to use. The circle can have depth and purpose and integrity, not because of what you do in the space, but of who you are. So the more authentic you are, the more people will feel that, and the more they'll be able to share. And collectively, when we really express our authentic selves in this gentle form of leadership in circle, you can support this wider collective growth of that gentle, authentic, and more matriarchal kind of leadership that we've talked about tonight. So let's break the self down a little bit more. I really, truly believe that you can only hold others as deeply as you are held. And whether you are brand new to circle work, or I have many people who have worked therapeutically with individuals and groups for decades who find that circle asks something different of them, you need to make sure that you have a deep sense of being held both by yourself and by others. It's your body, your presence, your nervous system that are really the foundations from which the space is created. And sometimes people think, that's all fine, but I want to learn what I actually do in the space. And actually, this is the real work here, making sure that you are as grounded and rooted as possible. Because circle isn't something that you do, it's something that you sort of become the vessel for, and that starts to move through you. People often want to have a script, and there are many people out there who will tell you on the internet and give you circle scripts. And you know what? Wonderful. If that's something that you want to do, fantastic. But actually, circle's deeply relational. we're in a relational field with other people. And a simple way of saying that is human beings are unpredictable. Human beings in a group are unpredictable. And so you will never know what will happen in the space. Part of your job is to be able to become this vessel where you can respond in an appropriate way to the unknown, really getting uncomfortable with the unknown. And when you start to do that, and when that sort of inner space is kind of tended to, you don't lead circles in that top-down way, you sort of embody them. And I probably wouldn't have learnt this if it wasn't for some of my own experience in space holding training. I did a course, it was 6 months long. It was about space holding in some forms. It had a particular methodology, and it was in person, a weekend a month, 2 days in a room, loads of guest teachers, lots of teaching of this methodology. It was amazing. 6 months later, and to this day, I could not tell you a single thing that I learned. I could not tell you what the methodology was or how to explain it, but what I learned in that space was about the feeling that was created in the room. And there was this doorway that opened up within me that allowed me to be able to allow the circle to flow through me and allow me to do the work that I do today. And so for each of you in your own way, this will be a journey of coming home to your own voice, your truth and groundedness, so others can do the same. Here are some questions. Again, you'll get a replay, so you don't need to rush to write these down, but I'll just share them aloud as some things to carry with you on your journey beyond here. Where do I feel really well resourced and where do I need support? For many of you here, you will have other skills and tools that equip you in some way to do circle work. Where do you feel really confident and where do you need to learn more or to have more support around you? Do you stay grounded when someone else is dysregulated or do you get pulled in? So like, how well can you hold yourself in the face of what might be unfolding in a group that's unpredictable? Are you able to have strong boundaries with participants and with yourself? This one for me is really big. Am I willing to be in process, to be a student of this path again and again? I sort of teach this work, but actually I am a perpetual student. I never, ever stop learning. And I always often think that circle work is like a spiral. You think you've got something and then you come down the spiral and you learn it again in a different way and you deepen and you go around again and you deepen. And finally, and this can be really beautiful to help share about your work and put it out into the world, can I name the moments that I've been shaped and softened by this work? So that's the self. You will always be working with the self. The next sort of thing that happens in the space, part of the compass that you can orient towards, is story. Story is foundational in my circles and the circles that I teach about. And the reason that I love to talk about story is it's a human bridge. It is, we talked earlier about, so many of you said, wanting to build connection and the sense of compassion and togetherness. Story is the way that we do that. In a sort of neurological sense, there's something wonderful that happens in our brains called neural coupling, where when someone shares a story, literally our brains will find similarities so that we form connection with that person. And in circle, story means that we can create a space for listening, witnessing, belonging, connection through story, all those things that you talked about earlier. And the sort of 3 levels of impact of learning to work really well with story and really dedicating yourself to allowing story to flow through your spaces is firstly, in your own life, learning to tell your own story with honesty and gentleness and generosity can feel like such a liberation. It really can. I talked earlier about finding my voice through telling my story in circle and continuing to over the years. It's allowed me to be more who I am. And it's allowed me to touch a part of myself that is a kind of deepest, truest part. And I don't know if I would have found that if I'd continued doing what I was doing before, which was working in the television industry, which has a very different vibe, I can tell you, even though we were working with story there. And that's where I learned much about the craft of story. Working with story in terms of the impact for your circle, it creates this bridge between the speaker and the listener. It's a really powerful tool for healing. I don't know if any of you have ever experienced it in circle or other types of spaces where you have listened to someone else, you have recognized yourself in them, and you have felt something shift within you. It's such a generous act. And then collectively, I really believe that through story, we can start to move away from this polarization that we've talked about tonight and this sense of really entrenched difference to a deeper sense of connection, compassion, and possibility. Story helps us realize the ways that we're more similar than we are different. And I'm going to share something quickly here because it feels just an example of what this makes possible. And, you know, it's not something I plan to talk about, but it feels important. You might have come across this event on social media, and it was advertised as a women's circle event. And there was arguments happening in some of the comments about what constitutes a woman, and arguing with me because I hold a trans inclusive space. And one of the comments that someone said who was saying, you know, I really believe that if you were to sit with the trans women and listen to their story, you might have a different opinion on their humanity, their validity, the journey that they've been on. And I mention that because it's really difficult to sit alongside others that are different and to really hear them and have that curiosity and open-mindedness and not be moved in some way. So, to summarize on story, it's how we can build bridges across difference. It's how we remember that we belong to each other, as we talked about earlier, that sense of belonging, not coming from sameness, but coming from an acceptance of difference. This bridge of story is this relational aspect where half of what happens is what's spoken and half of what happens is how it lands and moves in others. I don't know if any of you have experienced this firsthand. I always really find it moving when I do. Empathy arises not from agreement, but from resonance, where we begin to inhabit each other's worlds. Story sharing can heal, but only in containers strong enough to hold truth and compassion and difference. And we'll talk in a moment about how you can create this kind of strong container. And, you know, without real intention, the idea of inviting people to share stories can really tip into sort of performance or trauma dumping. Like we've probably all been in a space where someone really just brings everything in. And it's not to say that difficulty isn't welcome, but making sure that there's an appropriate set of guardrails around how we share story. Or storytelling can sometimes tip into advice giving in a covert way. And one of the guidelines of my space is there's no advice giving. And I think that for all of you who want to be circle holders and facilitators, your role is not to control the story, but it's to create a space sacred enough to hold it. In my documentary days, my job as a director or as a producer was not to control the outcome of the story. We couldn't, it was real life. My job was to create the ideal conditions in which interesting, true stories could emerge. And there's a similarity there. Not to control, but to be a steward of the kind of space where beautiful story can emerge. So here are the sort of some of the things that you'll need to be able to create healing story sharing spaces. I think you modeling grounded embodied storytelling is important. Strong group agreements. A sense of really reverent listening and honoring silence in the space. And so some questions that you can take away. Firstly, for yourself, where are you being called to tend to your own story with more honesty or gentleness? Do I understand how to open, sustain, and close a circle space with clarity so it becomes that really holding container for story to emerge in the way that I was just talking about? What do I consciously do in my circles that allows participants to feel held, seen, and honoured? And wherever we invite story and we are the ones sort of inviting into the space, in fact, in all of these points that I'm sharing tonight, there could be some sort of power dynamic. So can I hold power, i.e. as the person who has gathered the group, not that you want to be wielding power, ethically and humbly, without that sense of controlling that we talked about earlier, or without that sense of collapse that I also mentioned earlier if things don't go as planned. Okay, the next point of the compass is the sacred container. And this is a space where you want to bring trauma-aware design, real containment through intentional structure, and the real liberation of spacious holding. So many people pack their circle spaces full to the brim of stuff. They over facilitate. Has anyone been guilty of that? I don't know if anyone who holds circles now has just been like, oh, we'll do some journaling, and then we'll pull some oracle cards, and then we'll do a meditation, and then we'll do a bit of yoga, and then we'll be like, we've probably all been to spaces like that. Over facilitation is not the one, nor is under facilitation where you do too little. And so with our space design, we want to do something in between. And the impact, again, on these 3 levels of what the space can do is what you model in the space can start to ripple out into your personal life, your work life, your way of being in the world. I'll share some stories about how it's rippled out into people's working lives later, but it can really have that ripple effect. When you create a very robust space, sorry, it's just some people in the waiting room I'm going to let in. Bear with me. When you're model it in your circle, there's a real opportunity for profound personal transformation. And it's a very gentle method, but one that can be a real gift to participants. I couldn't believe when people started coming to my spaces and they were telling me over time how their life felt like it was changing. And then again, with our sort of collective eyes and hat on, circle can become the kind of place to rehearse the kind of society that we want to live in, which has got strong foundations of compassion, non-hierarchy, and this spirit of communal care. I know there's a lot to take in here, and we do not have enough time, but I'm going to let you watch the replay if you want to catch up and see what lands tonight and what you want to take with you. The space is the medicine. So not only the stories, but the strength of what the space can hold. If any of you have been to a really well-held circle, you will feel that there is this sort of invisible boundary that protects the space from the outside world, that allows something magical to emerge, that just feels like you're really being held, both by the facilitator, but also by something almost sort of magical in the air. Some people think that when I talk about the space that I mean the aesthetics, what it looks like, what it, wearing the right thing, looking the part, having to be all vibey and aspirational, having the right oracle cut, like all that stuff. It can be beautiful. And I think it's really important to create a beautiful space. Beauty is healing and has medicine in itself. But actually, that's not the most important thing. I was sitting here last week. It was boiling hot in this room. I was sweating and red, and my hair was rubbish, and the light was wrong. And do you know what? I didn't look good at all. I looked terrible, but I brought my authentic self to the space, and that's where the holding came. Not in me looking the part and having some goddess robes on. Like that's not what creates the space. It's the tone that you bring, your group agreements. The group agreements are some of the most important foundational things you can put in place. So what's like okay in the space and what isn't, and your personal presence, how people feel in your presence. How does it feel to be in your space? Because circle is this container which holds the emotional, the energetic, the structural, and the ethical. And this is a big area of discussion, but I want to touch on it tonight a little bit. Who's heard people talk about creating safe spaces? I used to talk about creating safe spaces all the time. And actually, safety is something that many of us aspire to. So I'm just catching up with the chat. Yeah, lots of people saying yes. So I want to talk about brave space instead. So the idea of safe space is not necessarily not necessarily very helpful, because what feels safe to me, based on my body, my lived experiences, my background, how I encounter the world, is not the same as what will feel safe to you, based on your lived experiences, your upbringing, your experience of how the world is. And so instead of seeking to create safe space, we can seek to create something called brave space, which is something that really allows inclusion and expression across identity, background, whether people are carrying trauma, what the lived experience that they have is. And this shift from trying to not trying to guarantee safety, but actually creating the conditions in which people can experience their own sense of safety. So it's not something it's not something we guarantee, but it's something that we can sort of cultivate, is a really helpful shift. And I first learned about this concept of safe space to brave space from an essay called From Safe Space to Brave Space, which I think there's two places that talk about this that I can think of. There's a book called The Art of Effective Facilitation. It's a social justice facilitation book, quite heavy, really interesting though. And Ada Marie Brown's work, who is a wonderful facilitator, a book called Holding Change. Some essays that speak to that in both those spaces. And really, I mention brave space today because it's the place where truth-telling and difference and rupture and repair are welcomed with care. You know, if we're trying to create the kind of world we want to talk about, we were talking about earlier, that's some of the kind of qualities that we need to bring to the space. So your job isn't to control the space because you cannot guarantee you'll get it right. I've made so many mistakes. Of course I have. I'm a human being trying to hold these spaces. But what you can commit to instead, and for those of you going out and doing this, I really want you to try and pledge to come to your spaces with this sort of intention, which is to be in right relationship to the work. So staying open, staying responsive, being humble, being open to feedback and criticism if it comes about how people encounter the space, and holding it graciously. Really, instead of trying to force the outcome of the space, you can do some of the things we've touched on earlier, but I'll name them again. Model that grounded, reflective presence, create and uphold those group agreements. If there's harm being caused, interrupt it clearly but gently, and honor silence as part of the experience. I always say in my group, silence is a welcome member of this group. Silence holds great possibility. And so many of us have been taught and conditioned socially to be afraid of silence. And this can really start to allow the true magic and medicine that's needed to emerge. Okay, let's talk about society. So these are the wider ripples that our work can have. That cultural repair, that collective care, that impact, that sense of integrity, interdependent, I can't talk. Let me see if I can say this word, interdependence. And the benefits of really making sure that when we think about all the things we've talked about, these points of the compass, that you keep this wider lens in your view, you keep this wider aperture. When you do that, the impact of your life on your life can be that you stop compartmentalizing your values. Like, oh, I'm a person of the world who has these values, but in my work, they don't come into it. Circle is a living expression of my values, and for many of the people who work with me, it's of theirs too, and it can be for you as well. So it can be an expression of who you are and what you believe, so that you can have this deep sense of congruence that feels like peace in your body, like that feeling of like, I am doing something that really represents the kind of world that I want to live in, the kind of life I want to lead. When you, in your circles, create the kind of space that we were talking about earlier, you design for brave space, you allow your participants to go deeper, they can really move from kind of a catharsis of like, wow, this was healing for me, to change. So they start to feel activated in a way that makes them go out and take action in their real lives. And then collectively, and this is perhaps the most important thing, and perhaps why all of us are here this evening in different ways, it's the moment where we stop trying to heal alone. You know, I have deep respect for therapy. I have trained in narrative therapy, kind of story-based therapy. I have had therapy for many, many years, and yet there's something different that I get from the therapeutic with a small t effect of being in community, being in a circle. It's a place where we get to say goodbye to individualism and truly have this sense where we're starting to build together a cultural movement of gentle leadership and listening, and this real sense of being part of the collective, not as a series of individuals. And that's because this, you know, we have the opportunity to someone shared earlier, they want to learn to hold space for grief. Circle can hold grief, not just in individual pain. It can hold collective grief. It can hold shared wisdom through stories. It can have this relational power, this sort of sense of human dignity rather than transactional exchange. And we often talk about the sort of more tender emotions that Circle can support us to express. It can also be a place to experience rest and joy and celebration as vital practices. And I think that this has an opportunity to provide any of us who are going to the spaces or offering the spaces to be a real kind of counter-cultural refuge, a place where you can land and just be for a couple of hours, restore, and then go out and make impact in the world. Okay. I feel like Circle work and Circle can be a rehearsal room for a different future. We've talked about that weaving of genuine community, how it's slow and it's quiet and it's radical. And Adrienne Marie Brown, who I mentioned earlier, she talks about this idea of what we practice at the small scale sets the pattern for the whole system. Let's start to do that. For those of us who want to hold this work, let's start to practice at a small scale what we want to see in the system. And we do that by each of us bringing our unique thread of who we are, how we hold space, and how we offer sacred medicine to our groups in the world. None of us will do it the same. None of us should do it the same. We shouldn't be trying to follow a blueprint. This is why this isn't a blueprint. It's more of a compass of different elements that you want to rest into at different times in your spaces. We want to bring our deep individuality. Okay. And so I want to bring this back to you for a moment with some final questions. How do you want to live your life in the next 1, 5, 10 years? Pick a time scale. And what at the moment, what real world action are you taking? How do you want to live your life? And what real world action are you taking? We're at this threshold collectively. What does your individual version of that look like? And then on the other side of this, what could we collectively create if each of us committed to taking action? Truly. And I'd love to hear your answers in the chat. What could we create collectively if we each committed to action? Systematic change. I'd love to. A better world to live in. And on a personal note, a quiet space out of London to be away from the negative spaces. Revolution, but soft power. Permission to authentically be something beautiful. Global abundance. Women leaders, a more truthful, connected, relational society. Trust among different communities. Heart-led society. Peace. We uplift the frequency as an invitation to all. Spread the light. I'm training to be a therapist. I want to empower women through collective experiences and love. A love-first world. Peace. Raising feminine power and connection. Uprising of connected peoples. We all need to go out to the streets to support the most vulnerable. Meaningful connection. Resonating healing. Beautiful. Research in women. There is so much possibility in this. And one of the reasons that I offer these spaces is so that each of us who are doing this work in some way or feel drawn to it can come together and really hear one another and see one another and remember that we're not alone in it. When I started Circle, I felt so alone. I felt like I had a couple of people who really got it, but in my working life, certainly I felt like, oh, I'm doing this weird thing that nobody really understands. And I didn't feel like I had a home. And it's only when I started finding communities that really understood circle work that it started to flourish. Yes, in the chat, I want men involved in this as well. I'm just going to tell a quick story and then I'm going to move on. I talk about women because I believe that women still experience such oppression and violence and need actually the kind of community that women's spaces can only provide. I believe deeply in that. But also, as part of my wider work, all of what we've talked about today isn't gender specific. And I deeply believe in the need for spaces specifically for men and mixed groups. And so a couple of weeks ago, I went and I held 40 professionals in a major UK institution in circle. 2 groups of 20 sharing their hearts, men and women, mixed in a workplace context. It was beautiful, it was vulnerable, it was astonishing. And so there's so much potential for this work for all. And so although I talk primarily about women, nothing that we've talked about tonight is limited. So for those of you who want to go out and do it, you can take some of these principles that you've learned. I would love to hear from you what has landed most with you this evening. And then for those of you who want to find out more about how to take the next step with me specifically, I'll share about how I do that. I know there's many of you who've done that with me in the past before, but I'd love to just hear what you've taken away. You can just share a word or a sentence in the chat. The power of circles, an act of remembering, no script, brave space, belonging, I'm not alone. The power of intention, that simplicity is good enough, inspirational. How can I live more in my truth? Soft, quiet leadership, brave space. The being, not the doing, confidence, going first, collective healing. Ideas to include in a novel, brilliant. The future has an ancient heart, equality, simplicity, shoulder to shoulder to shoulder. Beautiful. For each and every one of you who has been generous enough to spend the last 90 minutes as part of our collective, because we can't do it alone. I need all of us to be in the space together to offer this kind of space. And you've been so generous with your time. I just want to ask those of you who this resonated with, just to think about one thing that you might do to take some action in your real life. I know there are circle holders here already. I know there are people who are brand new. What can you commit to doing after this to take some of the principles out so you can start to create this ripple effect in your own way? And this won't be for all of you, but it will be for some of you. I've mentioned a couple of times this evening that I offer a facilitator program. I've been offering it since 2018. It's the biggest in the UK. And I'm going to just talk through what that looks like for those of you who might be interested in that. Like I say, it's not for all of you, and I don't expect all of you to take it. We work in small groups, but if anyone wants to hear, I'm just going to share on that. I have to share my screen again. The technical aspects of Zoom and screens, I must confess, is not my favorite, but I'm going to have a go. Okay. Hopefully you can see this. No, you can see my Spotify. There we go. Can you see that? Little thumbs up if you can. Lovely. I can basically only see Carly, so thank you, Carly, because that was a very good thumbs up. So a couple of times a year, I run a facilitator training, and it is really, for those of you who want to step forward, if you've got that feeling of wanting to be the kind of leader that this world is aching for, to transform your sort of instinctive way of holding space into more of a sense of mastery and hold spaces that starts to change lives. Have a sense of feeling really anchored and skilled and equipped in this work so that you can go into any circle knowing I can not only hold it well, but I can do it in any room with any group and do it professionally. Have that that professional element so that you're not just winging it all the time. and really start to turn the longing that so many of us have into a sense of legacy. So you might want to bring it into your business, into your community, into your school, into your workplace, or practice it. Many people go and practice it in their homes, in their local communities. There are so many different ways of doing it. You might have gathered tonight that one of the things that I really am all about is going beyond the surface, going to depth. Really teaching you and sharing with you how to become someone who holds ritual and healing and change with grace, but in a way that's very light when people watch you. It's almost like they don't know it's happening. I love the sense that happens when there is a movement and being part of groups of women who do this. So we work in small groups in the training. We work in groups of around 22, but you become part of a much bigger Sister Stories collective. Many people are here tonight from that collective where we're really going out and doing this in the real world. And it's a chance to come here to do some of that work that your soul came here to do. It's accredited. And it's accredited by CPD, which is a really rigorous form of accreditation. And I got that because I'd been doing it for a number of years. People have been having great results. But do you know what I wanted? I wanted real world credibility. I wanted myself and the people who came to these spaces to be able to have a stamp of approval that said, this isn't just sort of airy fairy stuff. This is rigorous and it's robust. And since we got this accreditation, people have been able to take it into so many more organizations. And so that's something we offer you as part of this path. And it's really a journey for you and it's beautiful, but it feels important to name it is a professional training journey. And we have sort of two main types of people who come, those who are brand new, or those who have a holding circle already, but want some support to take it even deeper. And so it gives you the structure, the tools, the standards, and the confidence to lead in a way that really starts to create ripples and change lives. One of my favourite people to talk about is Umberine. Umberine is a very senior NHS doctor, and she has taken this work into the NHS. It's had a ripple effect in her work, but she's also used it to create anti-racism spaces for Amnesty International. And so she does this alongside literally life-saving work, and it's infused all that she does. She says it's made me a better doctor to my patients. Olivia Fern. If you don't know Olivia Fern, find her on Spotify. Her music is majestic. She trained and she came to do a project with the Arts Council where she held 150 women in various singing circles across the country. There are so many ways people take this out. This is Charlotte. She talks about Circle being part of her activism. And she says, you know, it's given me a business and it's given me an income because I do believe that it's important because we live in this capitalistic system. Unfortunately, unless we have endless resources, many of us do need to make money from it. But it's also become part of this activism. So purposeful paid work. And then this is Michelle, who's holding regular space in the community and online. There are so many ways that we do it. Sometimes it looks like taking it into external organizations, and sometimes it looks like gathering people in our homes and our spaces. And this is Sandeep, who is planning a retreat very soon. She keeps posting about wonderful retreats that she's planning since doing the training. And she said, deep gratitude for the care, inclusion, and sheer professionalism. There's an immense value in your facilitation and support, and I'm already applying what I've learned. I'll just share Leanne's story briefly, but she found that the training that she had in Circle, she's a social worker by background, and she brought this work firstly to groups of young people in her community, but secondly to her son, who has ADHD. And the way that she learned to hold space for him and meditate and kind of calm him, she saw his whole system relax. So a beautiful example of finding this work really landing in our homes as well as our communities. So there are sort of three layers of transformation, and we've touched into much of this tonight. And so I'm not going to go through this and read it out, but there's that personal element, what it can do for you, the depth of the transformation that you can experience. where the work really meets you first, transforms you from the inside out, and then moves through you as you offer it. There's that professional element, the qualification, the robust framework, the knowledge that you can hold space with skill and clarity and integrity. And the more years I hold this, the more confident I am that it's giving people an unshakable foundation for holding space of all kinds. So sometimes people use it only for circle, and sometimes they use it to inform other types of work that they do. Someone who's in a very corporate environment was sharing that she's a woman in a team full of men, was sharing, I use it in my Monday team meeting in corporate to have a more sort of non-hierarchical way of starting the week so everyone's voice can be heard. That sounds very good to me. And then there's a collective element, being part of this wider movement, bringing circle into these types of spaces we've talked about tonight, and really us working together to start to heal culture one gathering at a time. It's 5 months long. It's very immersive. It's held online, but it is one of those experiences where you will very quickly forget that you're online. We have a robust facilitation framework that you'll learn. We meet weekly for live group calls, and we've got world-class guest teachers. So you're not just learning from me, you're learning from a variety of people, which I'll talk about in a moment, to really give you different strands and skills to your bow. There's an opportunity to have a group call where you can get weekly one-to-one support with me. We put on a program of circles for you, held by people who've trained previously, so that you can be in their space and really experience the medicine of circle firsthand. So much of this is about being held yourself. You'll get personalized feedback on your facilitation, so you can really have that knowledge that you are doing the right thing and that you're on the right path. And we have small groups where you can really practice your art of facilitation and go on the journey together. And I don't know if she's still here, but I saw that Charlotte Sarr was here earlier. And Charlotte, I know that you are still in touch with so many of those women that you have worked with in your training many years ago, and that those friendships have really sustained. And for many people, it's kind of becomes long-term, personal, and sort of peer, like long-term connections. I feel like it's having a little sort of set of circle colleagues as well who we can go to. We offer you some sacred business and soulful marketing guidance, a very robust module, which I'll talk about in a moment, because I really do believe that it's helpful for you to have the tools to not only learn how to do this, but to get it off the ground. And if you want to make it part of your paid work, to have the tools to do that. You get the CPD accredited certificate that can open doors. There's no limit on how long you have the content for. I am not here to give you it for a short amount of time and then it disappears. You get lifetime access to that. And we have an alumni container where you can come back free. I offer a call every couple of months for anyone who's trained with me since the beginning. And we had one yesterday, and people were there celebrating, getting circles into big institutions and holding their first one after a break and asking questions and getting support. And it's just such a lovely long-term resource where you can come back without having to pay anything or kind of be in any sort of like ongoing structure other than knowing that it's there for you to dip into when you want. I talked about that fire earlier. I'm holding this fire for you, and I want you to be able to light your torch at it at any time and go back out. It's like sort of plugging into the mains. So here are the main people who I work with. There's me. You have learned a little bit about me. Emma Johnson on the team did this training in 2022, is a really experienced facilitator, and she is my right-hand woman in the training. She is just such a brilliant source of support and knowledge. And then Amelia Doncor on the right-hand side. She joins us for 3 sessions in the training. She also did this course herself I think in 2018. And she's an extraordinary facilitator, and she works with how to use your voice. She works with anger as an emotion, and she brings a really deep knowledge of facilitating in corporate spaces and also facilitating anti-racism spaces in corporate, if anyone is interested in that. Here are some of the guest teachers. What a lineup. I'm going to talk about them quickly. Tamu Thomas, nervous system expert, author, has a book called Women Who Work Too Much, which is extraordinarily good. I suggest you all read it. And she actually works with us in this training in the space of joy, in embodiment. She has such an energetic session, which allows us to touch into a different part than one of the other guest teachers, for example, would lead us to, who is Nikki Harrison, bottom right, who runs the grief space. She did this training in 2022, I think, and she teaches us how to steward grief. How do we work with it in our spaces? And so across these guest teachers, there's very different energies, very different elements of aspects that you'll need to know about in the space. At the top middle is Claire Rother. She is a trauma-informed space. She does our trauma-informed space holding module. She is one of 3 trauma teachers that I've had, because it's really important for me to have a deep knowledge of working with trauma in circle. And I've chosen her to be your guide in this because she's deeply practical. She gives you the theory, but also the tools. What do I actually do with someone when they're highly dysregulated in the circle? What do I do with their body? What do I do with my body when I'm triggered? Like, she is a beautiful, gentle, and really transformative teacher. So she has an entire module, which could be a course in itself. Likewise, Gail Berry, an extraordinary amount of knowledge. She's our business and marketing mentor. She has a course which teaches you all sorts of aspects of business and marketing that actually you can use for any other businesses you have, but really seeks to give you the sort of get up and go to take this out into the world. Bottom left, we've got Ava Glamaris, who works in the space of anti-oppression and sacred inclusion. So she talks about anti-oppression work widely. For white women in the course, she specifically talks about anti-racism. And for global majority women, she holds a really beautiful space, which allows you to work with any. Sometimes it depends what comes up. She actually holds an open space for you to bring anything that you need. Sometimes it's ancestry. Sometimes it's tension around race. She has a really beautiful way of holding space for you. And I don't attend that because it's not appropriate for me to, because I'm not a global majority woman, but the feedback we always get from her session is incredible. And then finally in the middle, we've got Abby Osho. She's an extraordinary circle facilitator. She is the facilitator in a BAFTA award-winning documentary called White Nanny, Black Child. It's about people who were privately fostered in the 70s. Extraordinary film. And she gets a group of men and women together to share their stories about being fostered as children, and the healing that happens in the room is extraordinary. And so she teaches about holding groups for both men and women. That's one of the things she teaches on, holding space for story, the facilitation challenges that she has found both in that space and more widely in her practice. And so there is so much that you get from this. And really what I want to say to you is that it's a course, but actually it's more like an apprenticeship. It's more like a way of learning this art of facilitation through osmosis, through being in a space that holds you really, really deeply. And we do a form that goes out to say, how did this training meet your expectations? 100% of those who responded said it exceeded their expectations. And so we really work hard to try and make this as rich for you as possible. So we're nearly at the end of time. We're just over time, forgive me. I always try to keep it exactly to 9 o'clock. Thank you for staying with me. For those of you who are interested in taking this next step, we're in an early enrolment period at the moment. It begins in October 2025, and the structure means you can be running circles by the end of the year. The course fee is £2,500, which includes everything we've talked about, many things we haven't talked about, that lifetime access and that ongoing alumni support. And there are I've misspelt payment, forgive me, payment plans available. If you need a longer payment plan, it's really good. It's a really good opportunity to ask for that in early enrolment, because it's something that we can offer more in early enrolment than later in the process. And there are 3 sort of core groups you can choose from. The core calls are meet fortnightly for 90 minutes on Wednesdays at 1 p.m. UK time, Thursdays at 1 p.m. UK time, or 7 p.m. UK time. For anyone who feels like this is the path for them and like to join us, there's a couple of things that I really encourage you to do. The first is go to our website, perhaps Emma can put it in the chat, and read through all the information, see how you feel, see what resonates in your body. The second thing is, it's so important to me that the right people are in the space. And so if you have any doubt about whether it is or isn't for you, or whether you'll get out of it what you want to get out of it, I offer next week, I've got lots of time available for people to have one-to-one calls. Come and book a call with me. Talk to me about it. I don't persuade anyone to be in the space. The space is successful because the right people are in there. And actually, sometimes I say to people, this isn't right for you. I did that last week. And I always seek to operate in integrity there. But I think sometimes that one-to-one connection can be helpful. As an early enrollment bonus, for anyone who signs up by the 21st of July, I'm putting on an in-person retreat day in the UK in Brighton in September, on the 20th of September. So we can spend the summer, you'll have access to the materials beforehand, the preparatory materials, you'll have access to the reading list, and then we can sit together in person before we begin to really give you a lovely grounded start to the process. And the other thing to say is I'll be sending information about this over the next couple of days. So watch your inbox. On Monday night, I'll be doing a Q&A at 7:30 for an hour. So if you've got any questions there, I'll be there to answer them. And just feel into whether this feels like the next right step for you. I'm here to support if it does. I love this quotation from Ursula K. Le Guin. You cannot buy the revolution. You cannot make the revolution. You can only be the revolution. It is in your spirit or it is nowhere. And I feel like tonight we have touched into some of that. We've done so much tonight. Thank you for being here. To close, I want to offer you something from Amelia, the guest teacher who I mentioned earlier. And every time I hear these words, I think it captures something of the opportunity we have to do this work together. So you might want to turn up your volume for this one. It's beautiful, but it's a little bit quiet. And so turn up your volume and I will leave you with the words of Amelia. Oops.
I believe in women. I believe women have the right to be heard. I believe women are complex and compassionate, full of fire, full of stories, and deserve a place, a safe space to hold themselves whole. I believe women have power. I believe women have the power to uplift other women, to connect into the rich tapestry of interconnectedness that is life. I believe women can unlock, derobe, debunk, and thrive. I believe in women. I believe that there's a kernel of hope in all of us that wants to be heard, and Circle can help that grow. I believe in women. I believe in women. I believe in the sisterhood. I believe that through sharing and deep listening, we can understand and empower. I believe in magic. The magic of the circle. The magic of womanhood. The magic of love. I believe in women, and just in case it wasn't clear, I believe in women.
Thank you to Amelia for those words. Thank you for being here. And to close, I would love to invite you to share just a word about how you're leaving the space tonight. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Committed, inspired, nourished, rested and peaceful, hopeful, empowered. I believe in women. Moved, calm, grounded and softer, wrapped in a warm blanket, nourishing, beautiful. So for those of you who are interested in training, look out for your emails. Come and talk to me. come to the session on Monday night. I want to support you to make a decision that feels right for you. For those of you who've been here for the evening, I hope you get something out of it. I hope if we're meeting for the first time that this has been valuable to you and that has sparked something that you can take out and take action with in your life. And to close, I would love to invite you to just get your candle if you have it. And let's just take a moment to blow out our candles together to close this evening. And then if you want to unmute, we can all say goodbye to one another. And thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye for now.
Bye. Thank you, Gemma.
Bye. So
Bye.
much.
Hi.
So much.
All
Hi.
goodbye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Bye. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
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 Bye, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Bye-bye.
Bye.